Today's episode deals with several mature topics, including abortion and promiscuity. Listener discretion is advised.
I was already doing all kinds of things. Like, I had become really promiscuous, but it was different. It was like self-destruction. Like, I don't care about myself. Nobody else cares about me. I don't deserve love, so I'll just throw my life away.
I'm Paul Hastings, and you're listening to Compelled, a weekly podcast with unique stories from the kingdom of God told by the people compelled to live for Him. This is episode 26 of our podcast, and believe it or not, we only have 5 more episodes before we wrap up season 2. So whether you've been listening since the beginning of episode 1 or this is your first time tuning in, thank you for listening, and we hope that you are blessed. Last week, we heard from Todd Nettleton from Voice of the Martyrs. Todd had many stories about modern-day Christians he's met who are being persecuted and martyred throughout the world, and he shared many of the unique perspectives he's gained on persecution. You can hear all of that and more during last week's interview with Todd at compelledpodcast.com. This week, our guest is Jill Robbins. Jill had an abortion at the age of 17, which was only the beginning of a self-destructive lifestyle that she pursued, including drugs and promiscuity, which in turn resulted in the decline of her mental health. Her life was falling apart until she found the only one who could put the pieces back together for her again. That story coming up right after a word from today's sponsor. This episode of Compelled is sponsored by the Content 19 Film Festival and Media Summit. Content 19 is a Christian film festival and media summit that takes place on a real working film set at Capernaum Studios just west of Fort Worth, Texas from September 17th through 19th. The purpose of the conference is to equip Christian filmmakers with practical tools and skills and to provide networking opportunities with industry leaders. I've attended and spoken at the festival multiple years and can testify that it's an excellent event. I loved the behind-the-scenes tour of Capernaum Studios last year, which has both indoor and outdoor sets and was recently used in a TV show you may have heard of called The Chosen. They have some great workshops this year and several boot camps for young filmmakers, actors, screenwriters, and more. This year, Compelled listeners can get a 20% discount on any type of registration or boot camp using the promo code COMPELLED, all caps. The promo code expires on September 7th, and the conference runs from September 17th through 19th. To learn more and register, visit content19.org. Again, that's content19.org, and you can save 20% on your registration using the promo code COMPELLED. I met with Jill and her husband at their home in Central Texas a few months ago, and we quickly formed a warm friendship over the next couple of hours. Jill's journey of faith has had many twists and turns over the years, but some key events in her early life played a larger role to come.
My mom took us to church. My dad didn't go with us. As a kid, I didn't think much of it at all, except what kind of fun we were going to have when we got there. My dad was not around a lot, and he didn't bond real well with my brother and I, so he was kind of an absent dad, and he was kind of a ladies' man. He wasn't faithful to my mom, didn't provide very well. So my mom was she was a frustrated woman that felt like she wasn't loved and didn't have security. And they separated multiple times when my brother and I were really young. And then by the time we were in 3rd and 5th grade, my mom left him and she moved to the Temple Belton area where she had lots of family, siblings. And so I just grew up without that dad influence, my brother and I both, because he didn't pay child support. He actually didn't see us for about 10 years. And so he just wasn't in the picture at all. And I wasn't a very happy little girl. I felt sadness a lot. And I think that had to do with just the divorce of my parents. My mom is one of 5 siblings. She's the only sibling that ever divorced. The rest of them had, long, good marriages. And I think that hung over us as our little family, as the divorced family.
Yeah.
Even though my family, other family members didn't make us feel that way, it was just something that we carried, the shame of kind of. As I got older, preteen and stuff like that, my concept of God was that he was disappointed in me, that I couldn't live up to his standards, and that he was the big bad guy in the sky, kind of. And so I remember feeling a lot, some people, if they do everything right, they feel pretty good about themselves and they can do this Christian life. But if you can't do things right, then the Christian life is just not for you because you can never make God happy.
Yeah.
And that's where I found myself.
Yeah.
That's the feelings I had. I would look around at different family members, cousins. I had like 30-something cousins when we moved up here. We all lived close together. And it seemed like they could do the Christian life. They always did things right. But I just always kind of felt like an outsider. So as I got a little older, 15, 16, I was, I rebelled, but very secretive behind my mom's back. She was working full-time, single parent, and I was doing things I shouldn't do. And I have always thought that it all started with not having the love of my dad, and therefore looking for that affection just in all the wrong places. A little girl that doesn't feel secure in her daddy's love, she's gonna look for it in the flesh, and it's never gonna be healthy.
Jill began pursuing a lifestyle that she knew was wrong, but that at least offered the promise of love. But as she was about to find out, decisions have consequences.
When I was 17, I found myself pregnant and was sick for several weeks before I figured out what was wrong. And my mom did not have a clue. She just thought I was sick. I don't have a lot of memories. There are just a few real strong memories. And one of the strongest memories was when I told her, "Mom, I'm pregnant." She was so shocked that she nearly passed out on me. She just collapsed in my arms, basically.
Wow.
So it was a very difficult time for us. My mom and I both were most afraid, not of what God thought, but of what our family thought and what the church would think. I had already had it all figured out. Roe versus Wade had passed just a few years before that, and the church wasn't talking about abortion. We didn't hear anything about, this is a life, this is, if you ever find yourself in this situation, there are other answers, nothing like that. The church was silent on it. I was 17, so my mom had to sign for me to be able to have an abortion. And she was so devastated and so scared of what people would think that she did. She signed and did something that I don't think she would have ever done if I hadn't have been there to say, "Yes, Mom, we have no choice."
Yeah.
And so
was that like a lengthy discussion that you guys had, or?
It's hard to even remember. It was just such a stressful time. I think I just said, "Mama, I can't carry this baby, and we just have to get rid of it. And this is how we do it, and you have to sign for it." And she was just kind of like putty in my hands. She was so distraught. I take all the responsibility, even though she was the adult, because my mom was innocent in a lot of ways. She had no idea the stuff that I was doing behind her back. And I think if I had said, "Mom, this is a life, this is a baby, we need to do what's right by this baby," I think my mom would have gone, "Okay, what should we do?" But because I was like, "No, we have to go through with this. We have to get rid of it. We have to cover this up, this ugliness up."
Yeah.
And so I was like, no way am I going to carry a baby for 9 months and carry that shame in front of all these people that I grew up with, and that I go to church with.
Yeah. And where did you go for it?
It was here in Temple.
There was already a place in Temple.
There was a place in Temple. Mm-hmm. The boyfriend did that part of it. Like, he came up with the money. He, drove me to the clinic, and so I was just kind of numb.
Yeah.
At that point. So.
How many weeks pregnant were you when you had the abortion?
I don't know. I was just a foolish young girl, and I'm assuming I was in the first trimester.
Yeah.
When women usually experience morning sickness. So I went through with it. Don't have a lot of memories about the procedure itself, except that I was nauseated and sick afterwards and threw up. And nobody knew except my mom and my very best friend. She was one of my cousins, and we had been friends from 5 years old on. And I told her, and she kept the secret all many, many, many years.
What happened to the boyfriend after you had the abortion?
Well, and he was actually not even very much of a boyfriend. We were just making out and having fun, and he offered to marry me. I think he liked me maybe more than I liked him, and I was just like, no way. and so I just never had much more to do with him.
Even though the church wasn't talking about abortion, Jill knew that what she had done was absolutely wrong. She felt so unbelievably guilty, not only from the abortion, but also from the double life that she had been living. So Jill did the only thing that she thought she could do now to appease her guilt in front of God's eyes.
So I told my mom I wanted to get baptized and wash away the filth, and so I did. I got baptized soon after that.
And what did that mean to you to be baptized? Like, what was going?
Well, to me, in the church I grew up in, there was a lot of emphasis put on being baptized, and that's when you became a Christian. And I know they taught more than that, but that's all I heard, And so I really just felt filthy, and I wanted to be washed clean of that. And so I went through the actions of being baptized, and then was going to try really hard to be a good girl. But after that abortion, my self-esteem was so low, and I had such self-loathing that that I didn't think I deserved anything good. And I actually plummeted after that point. My mom and I started having a lot of issues. I ended up moving out when I was 17 when I got the abortion. I graduated from high school the next year. But I was already doing all kinds of things. Like, I had become really promiscuous, still behind my mom's back, but it was different. It was like self-destruction. Like, I don't care about myself. Nobody else cares about me. I don't deserve love. So I'll just throw my life away. So I became very promiscuous. Again, like I said, my mom was clueless. She knew, I was rebellious. We were arguing all the time and stuff. And so she knew things weren't good with me, but she had no idea really what I was doing behind her back, drinking and, stuff like that. So moved to Austin when I was 19, moved in with a cousin who had always been very, I'd always been very close to. She's about 4 years older than me. And she'd always been very encouraging to me as I was growing up. And And so I moved in with her. She was going to a Bible church called Believers Bible Fellowship in Austin. And I started going to church with her, and I loved the church. And it was really different from what I was used to, growing up at home. And I was trying to be a Christian. I loved the people, I loved the atmosphere, but I just couldn't do it. I couldn't walk the Christian life, and so lived with her for a couple of years, then moved back home because my mom encouraged me to get in the nursing program here at Temple College. And I never had really known what I wanted to do, and so I was just kind of working at retail and, not making much money, just, hand to mouth. And so I came back to Temple. I didn't move back in with my mom, which I could have, but I had too many things to hide because of my personal choices. And so I started in nursing school and got involved with a young man, met him at a club, and kind of a whirlwind relationship. We moved in together, and through part of that year of nursing school, by the end of nursing school, I knew it wasn't a healthy relationship, but he was very manipulative. And again, I felt like I didn't really deserve better. I'd already lived with him. Now I should do the right thing. And so I ended up marrying him, and we moved to San Marcos, and I was nursing in the hospital there, and he was going to the college there. The relationship got abusive. He was physically and emotionally, verbally abusive with me, and I came home to my mom a couple of times when he would really go off the deep end, but I would always come back because I again, this, weird, couldn't do some things right, but other things it was like, yes, but this is what I'm supposed to do as a Christian wife. And I wasn't even a Christian yet, but when you grow up in the church, you think you're a Christian. At some point during those 15 months there at the end, when he was so unstable, he had told me that he had been unfaithful to me. And so in my mind, it was like, okay, I'm free, because that's why my mom divorced my dad, because he had been unfaithful to her. That was your out. If your spouse was unfaithful to you, you could divorce them. Finally, he attacked me with a knife one day, and I got away from him, ran out, got in my car, and drove all the way back home, sobbing all the way.
Jill's life continued falling apart. She couldn't find any type of stability, and her life felt meaningless. So she delved deeper and deeper into her path of self-destruction with no end in sight.
Started work at Scott & White, and those couple of years from the time that my divorce happened, I was doing some cocaine, and I was smoking some pot, and I was drinking, and I was beginning to have some mental, I don't even know how to say it, just where I was scared to get out of bed and go to work some days. I hated pot because it always made me feel real paranoid. But every time I would go out with a bunch of friends and they would pass a joint around, it was like I felt compelled to do what everybody else was doing. And so I would smoke pot, and then I would feel paranoid and hate it. But there was some mental things beginning to happen with me. Like I was just afraid. I was unsure of myself. I felt like I was kind of losing my mind. And I really just think it was Satan's influence on me. I was just allowing a lot of things into my life. And so Satan was messing with my mind. And I would stay in bed and be afraid to go out, and just wondering what is going on with me. Am I going crazy? I remember distinctly calling my boss there at Scott and White one morning and just saying, I'm too scared to get out of bed and come to work. She was very understanding. She knew I was going through a lot of emotional stuff. And in the light of day, I kind of acted like a Christian or said that I was one or something like that. And as I flirted with, every man around, very promiscuous, just in and out of relationships, having relationships with people that I wasn't even dating. At one point, having a relationship with a man that I worked with, a nurse who was married. There was just, it was like there was nothing I wouldn't do. I think it was just a form of self-destruction. I just didn't feel like I deserved anything good.
Yeah.
So, and without the Holy Spirit, your flesh just takes you to really ugly places.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
And yet there were times when I would listen to Christian music and weep and sob and want to be good. But then I would choose not to be good in my choices.
Jill hated her life and loathed who she had become. But no matter how hard she tried or how badly she wanted, she just couldn't seem to change her life. But then one day, Jill received an unexpected invitation to a Christian conference.
This couple kind of came alongside me, and they were Christians. And I'm sure they were trying to reach out to me in my brokenness and stuff. And they were going to go to a seminar in Austin, Texas, and they invited me to go with them. I remember thinking, well, I'm supposed to be a Christian, so I think I'll just go with them. This will be fun, whatever. So we drove back and forth for a week together. We'd work during the day, drive down to Austin for the conference and back, and work the next day and drive back down again. I really don't remember much of anything I heard that week, except God's authority over us. But something happened that week. And at some point during that week, towards the end of the week, I went outside of the Palmer Auditorium to take a smoke break. And I was sitting on the curb, and I guess I was just thinking of all the things I'd been hearing. And to me, this is just God's sovereignty, and that God, and this is what makes me know that God chooses us and we don't choose Him. I don't know exactly how all that works, but I just know that I found myself in a place where the Word of God was washing over me, and God spoke to me, not audibly, in my heart and in my mind, and said, sorry.
What happened next was something that only God could have done. Jill had been surrounded by Christianity her entire life and had undoubtedly heard the gospel many times. But hearing the authority of God emphasized over and over again for a week at this conference, as well as how God protected those that were His, made a deep impact on her. Her heart was now softened as she knew of her desperate need for a Savior. And it was at this moment, this very moment on a curb, that God spoke to Jill in her heart with a message she never expected to hear.
He said, you're going to be okay. And you're mine. And I had never had any experience like that before. And I knew instantly that I wasn't going to have mental problems anymore. I just was completely assured that I was God's child and that He was going to take care of me. And at that point, my life did a 180. I just began to think differently about everything. I was seeing a guy at that time who was asking to marry me. I didn't really want to get married because I was very he was into Scientology. And so immediately I knew we had nothing in common, because now I know I am a child of God. And so it was just a month or two later that I broke up with him, and it's like I remember things just falling away from me. Like, I had no interest in those things anymore. No interest in drinking. No interest in cocaine or, any of that stuff that I'd been doing. And I had a joy that I had never experienced before.
In the midst of all the changes that Christ was working in Jill's life, she was about to reconnect with a man named Dave, who would eventually become her husband today.
So I was actually out. I was at Mom's. I was out exercising, walking on the road or something, and he drove by in his pickup. We actually already knew each other, because during those years of my single, wild, crazy days after that marriage, we had gone out on a date together once or twice, a couple times. And he was a old rodeo cowboy, and he called me a hippie chick.
The hippie chick.
And I was pretty wild and crazy. And Dave was very quiet, and not that he wasn't wild and crazy too, but I was very animated and silly, and he was shy. And so we didn't have much in common, really. So we went out a couple of times and then didn't go out anymore. And but then he saw me that day walking, and he turned around and came back, and I invited him into my mom's house, and I began to tell him what had happened in my life, that I'd been saved. And so we started seeing each other.
And was Dave a Christian at this point?
Dave had gotten saved when he was young, but he had wandered away for many years, and he was just at that point in his life where he was searching and finding his way back to God. He was excited to hear that I was a Christian, and I obviously acted and looked different than I had, before. And so it was something he was interested in, because that's what he wanted too. And so he started coming to Austin to visit me, or I'd come down here and we would go to church together and stuff. And I was really emotional. In fact, when Dave said that he wanted to get married, I was totally scared to death of that, because I didn't think I had what it took to be a good wife, and I'd already had a failed marriage and didn't feel like I knew how to pick men, and even though I had prayed about whether I should pursue this relationship with Dave, and I did at some point feel like God said, this is the man for you. This is who I choose for you. And but I was very afraid of marriage, because I didn't feel like I was very good marriage material. I don't know how long we dated. About 3 months, and then decided to get married. And he was really sweet and asked my mom, for her blessing. And so then we had a small little, really sweet church wedding. First couple of years of our marriage were pretty volatile too, because we fought a lot, had to work a lot of things out. But one thing Dave said to me at the beginning of our marriage was, let's promise each other that we'll never use the D word, no matter what happens, talking about divorce. And we've kept that promise to each other. We have definitely wanted to kill each other a couple of times, but we never used the D word.
Yeah. As we talked, Jill shared that even though Christ had saved her and forgiven her and had led her to her husband Dave, the effects of the abortion and her former lifestyle were still evident and long-lasting in their marriage.
God created women to be nurturers, not to be murderers of their own offspring.
Yeah.
And when you do something that's so against what God created you to be and to do, it cannot help but change you and harm you psychologically, spiritually, and emotionally. Those first 10 years of our married life, I would wake up in the middle of the night, weeping over regrets, over that baby that was lost and that I had no tenderness towards. And when I went into the marriage with Dave, there was so much baggage and so much shame for what I had done before marriage. I even struggled with believing that I was truly saved, even though I'd had this precious and beautiful conversion experience. I doubted my salvation all the time. And I remember going to my pastor one time and just saying, I don't know if I'm saved or not. How do I know if I'm saved? And repeating the prayer constantly, at the end of the church service, when he would pray a prayer, of salvation. Well, I was like, okay, I better do it again to make sure I've got this. We had a lot of issues sexually after we married. I couldn't enjoy the sexual relationship in marriage without emotion, a lot of emotion. I would weep. And I think it's because I abused it so much that I couldn't see it as anything but dirty. And Dave was the most long-suffering, patient man, because he dealt with that probably for 10 years into our marriage with me crying and being emotional. And so it was just time. God just, the more you learn about God and yourself as a child of God and who you are in Christ, then he begins to heal all that stuff. I strongly felt that God wasn't going to give me children because I didn't deserve children, because I had destroyed my first child. So, but then eventually we did get pregnant, and it was a very emotional pregnancy because I just knew he wasn't going to give me a healthy child because I didn't deserve a healthy child. And early in the pregnancy, when they did an amniocentesis, like they used to do frequently with women to look for anything, they said that something had come back abnormal and that our child might have Down syndrome. And I was like, of course, because I don't deserve a healthy child. And we did have a very healthy little girl. And then 3 years later, got pregnant and had another healthy little girl. And then we just never had any more children. Never used birth control and never had any more children.
Jill, like many other women, has discovered that the consequences of abortion reach farther than she would ever have imagined.
Abortion has a ripple effect all through our society, and every woman, and they say that almost every 1 in every 3 women have probably experienced a abortion or multiple abortions, and that ripple effect, it affects everybody. First of all, most women, I think, that have abortions kind of go off this deep end of self-loathing, and because many of them are very promiscuous, more so afterwards than they were before. Even though they carry shame for what they did, they end up doing it over and over again. It affects your husband. It affects the other children that come along later. It affects your parents because you've destroyed their grandson or granddaughter.
As time has gone on, Jill has found healing from her abortion first and foremost through Christ. Without him, there is no purpose for healing in the first place. And Jill recognizes that Christ is the ultimate source of true hope and forgiveness. Jill has also found healing by sharing about her abortion experience when appropriate, and just recently by talking about it with her mom.
One of the hardest things is, I think, thinking about the pain that it caused my mom. And of course, I'm oblivious to that, in your selfish, sinful way when you're young.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't until years later that I realized how horrible that must have all been for her. And then the fact that neither one of us spoke about it for so many years. It was just that dirty secret that we kept from everybody, When we were alone together one day, I just felt compelled to tell her how sorry I was for dragging her into such an ugly affair, something that she had carried such shame for so many years. And so I did ask her forgiveness, and when I did, it was like it opened the door for my mom to be able to talk about it and to be able to ask my forgiveness. And even though we've always been close, a new closeness, tenderness between us was there instantly. For a wound to heal, it needs to be open to the sunlight and instead of hiding it in the dark. And I think that just healed some wounded areas in my mom and myself for us to open up with each other and just be able to talk about this ugly thing in the past and ask each other's forgiveness for, me for insisting, and talking her into signing the papers so that I could do this thing, and her probably feeling like I was the adult in the room. Why didn't I say, no, we can't do this. This is a baby, but it was the fear of man really on both of us.
Yeah.
That we were so afraid of what other people would think.
Yeah.
That we gave no thought to the third life that was involved.
Yeah.
It's only been in the last 5 or 8 years that I actually began to tell people in my family. Now, other people knew, Christian friends, but family is hard, and it was still such a stigma.
Yeah.
For my family to know that I had done this way back when we were kids.
Over the last few years, Jill has become involved with a movement called the Abolition of Human Abortion. Two of the main distinctions that make abolition different from the regular pro-life movement is that the abolition movement is targeted at the complete abolition of the abortion industry, not just regulating different parts and pieces of it at a time, but it's more similar to the movements that abolished slavery in the United States and in England in the 1800s. The other distinguishing characteristic of the abolition movement is its emphasis on the supremacy of Jesus Christ and the need to save people's hearts, not just unborn life. The greatest miracle is not saving a life from physical death, but from spiritual and eternal death.
I think the logic of abolition gave me passion. We just got a lot more excited about being involved in the pro-life movement in an abolitionist style.
Yeah.
And it was at that point where I just felt compelled to use my story as a platform to further this movement, and just got more passionate. I honestly have felt like through being vocal about it, that has been healing.
Mm-hmm.
I went to a listening session at the Capitol this past session where about 40 women shared their stories of abortion. And one of the women that got up and shared her story said, if abortion had been illegal, I would have never considered it, because I wasn't going to break the law. And we tend to feel that way because, we'll break God's law, but we won't break the civil law because we don't want to get thrown in prison.
Yeah.
And so then the person who had put this listening session together got up at the end and said, I would just like to pose the question, how many of you in this room would have gotten an illegal abortion if it had been illegal at the time instead of legal? And every woman in the room said, no way, I wouldn't have broken the law.
Did a single one say that they would have still gotten
Not
a
a
back out?
single one. Not a single one. So it just goes to show that good laws restrain evil behavior. Think of all the millions of women who would not have gotten an abortion if it had been illegal.
Yeah.
We would have had to figure something else out.
Yeah.
Like maybe adopting those babies out to families that desperately wanted children, or figured out how to be a single parent and raise it with the help of our parents or something,
Yeah.
Good laws restrain evil behavior. As I have gotten more involved and actually gone to some of these abortion clinics to try to reach out to people who are going in to abort their children, that those that I've gone with to learn from and follow their example, that is how they reach out to these women. They reach out to them and men by sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ, and that these children are made in the image of God, that we're all made in the image of God, and that God's moral law says thou shalt not murder, and just really sharing the gospel with these people. They believe very strongly that you need to bring the gospel of Jesus Christ into the situation because it's the word of God that changes people. That's been really beautiful to watch and to learn how to try to do.
As we wrapped up our conversation, I asked Jill one last question. What would the Jill Robbins today say to the 17-year-old Jill Robbins that had just had her abortion?
Wow. I think I needed to hear the gospel of Jesus Christ. I needed to know what I had done was the worst possible thing anybody could do, to take the life of another person. And there was no weaseling out of it. I was the chief of sinners, as Paul called himself. But that God forgives even the chief of sinners. And that healing can't come with something that you hide in the darkness. Realize what a great God we serve, that He would forgive even such a heinous act as that. And it just brings healing. It just brings healing. It brings more love for Christ and what He did for us. Humility, because He did something for us we couldn't do for ourselves. Abortion brings incredible shame, and healing can't come if you hide the shame, and that we need to let the light of God shine on it.
Jill, it has been a pleasure hearing your story. I really appreciate you just taking the time to do this.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for the invitation.
As I listened to Jill share her convictions about abolition, I was reminded of when Joseph tells his brothers in Genesis 50 that what they had intended for evil, God used for good. Jill had originally sought out an abortion to hide her sin, and it's terrible that the abortion happened. But God has since then forgiven her and redeemed her, and Jill now uses that terrible experience to fight for the lives of other preborn children. I hope that all of us remember that there is no sin so great that it will separate us from the love of God, and that God can use anyone with any experience for His kingdom. If you'd like to learn more or get in contact with Jill, shoot me a message through our contact page at compelledpodcast.com, and I'll put you in touch. Also, if you'd like to learn more about abolition, visit abolishhumanabortion.com, or if you live in Texas like Jill, visit abolishabortiontx.org. You can also visit our website, compelledpodcast.com, and look up this episode for more information. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Compelled Podcast and on Twitter at Compelled Show. Also, please leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen to podcasts. It's one of the best ways to help other people find our show. If you'd like to support the work that we're doing with our podcast, then here are a couple of ways you can help out. The first way you can support Compelled is by sharing this episode with your friends. If you know someone who would be encouraged by Jill's story, then send this episode to them and consider sharing it on social media. It really makes a difference and it helps spread the word about the show. The second way is to join Compelled as a monthly member starting at $10 a month. As a monthly member of Compelled, you'll receive access to different perks, including behind-the-scenes recordings from our interviews, which is definitely the most popular perk for our members. When I actually sit down and interview guests, the actual recording is normally around 2 hours, and there are all kinds of stories and insights that we end up cutting out of the final episode because of time constraints. But if you really enjoyed listening to a guest like Jill today, then you can dive deeper and listen to all of our behind-the-scenes content when you become a monthly member. And at our $15 a month membership level, you'll also be invited to an exclusive monthly live stream. Once a month, you'll be sent a link to an invite-only video feed where you can meet other Compelled listeners, you can meet some of the team members from the podcast, and occasionally, we might even bring on one of our guests from the show to directly answer any questions you might have. And for a limited time, monthly members receive a free movie from Christian Cinema, another one of our sponsors. Since 1999, Christian Cinema has provided entertainment that inspires families. Christian Cinema has no monthly fees, and they have the largest selection of Christian and family-friendly movies. You can watch a movie today at christiancinema.com and get a free movie by becoming a Compelled monthly member at any level. But of course, the biggest benefit of being a monthly member is that you're allowing Compelled to continue sharing these important stories. You can become a monthly member today by visiting compelledpodcast.com and clicking the link at the top that says Become a Member. This episode was edited by Zach Fowler. Find him online at zachfowlerimagery.com. Our logo was designed by Josiah Jost. View his work at siadesign.com. Our website was created by Ben Billups. Follow Ben on Instagram at ben.billups. Our media assistant is Frank Allegrea. Find him on Twitter at TheFrankAllegrea. Our music outro is by Ben Jackson and Brian Facchino, and our assistant producer is none other than my wonderful wife, Sarah Hastings. I'm your host, Paul Hastings, and we'll be back with another compelling story next Tuesday.